My own brother called my wife and told her I only married her because she was rich. So I fired back by telling his wife he was only with her because of her sister. What? I slammed on the brakes so hard I nearly crashed into the car in front of me. My wife, Claire, sounded calm on the surface, but I could hear the anger she was trying to keep under control. "Ethan, your brother just called me," she said. "He told me you only married me for my money. He said you never loved me. According to him, I was nothing more than a bank account wearing a wedding ring." My hands were shaking so badly that I had to pull into the nearest parking lot before I could even think straight. "Claire, you know that's not true." "I know, Ethan. I know," she answered without hesitation. "I'm not calling because I believed him. I'm calling because of what he said right before he hung up." Somehow, the situation was about to get even worse. "What did he say?" "He told me your parents deserve to know what kind of son they raised. He said he's driving to their house right now so he can tell them the truth about you." Before she even finished, I had already pulled back onto the road, cutting off a delivery van as I sped away. My parents. My mom, who I'd spent years rebuilding my relationship with after everything that happened when I was growing up. My dad, who had looked me in the eye last Christmas and told me he was proud of the man I'd become. And now Mason was heading straight to their house to convince them that their son was a fake. That I was nothing but a gold digger. That my entire life was built on lies. The college degree I earned while working 3 different jobs, the business I started from absolutely nothing, and the marriage that meant more to me than anything else. "How long ago did he leave?" I asked. "Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 10. My parents lived about 20 minutes from Mason's office and roughly 15 minutes from where I was. If I caught every yellow light, I pushed the gas pedal down even harder. "I'm gonna get there before he does." "Ethan, I have to," I interrupted. "I have to be there first. I have to." My voice cracked, and hearing it made me hate how desperate I sounded. "I'll meet you there," Claire said immediately. "I'm leaving right now." I ended the call and drove as fast as I safely could. I reached my parents' house about 4 minutes before Mason. The second I pulled into the driveway and realized his car wasn't there yet, I nearly collapsed with relief. I still had a chance. Not much of one, but enough to warn my parents before Mason could poison them with whatever story he'd made up. I hurried inside. Mom and Dad were both in the kitchen. Dad was reading something on his tablet. Mom was wiping down the kitchen counter, even though it already looked spotless. She always cleaned when she was nervous. Both of them looked up the moment I walked through the door. The surprise on their faces was obvious. I almost never showed up without calling anymore. "Ethan?" Mom set the rag down. "What are you doing here?" I took a slow breath. I needed to stay calm. I needed to think before I spoke. "Something happened between Mason and Claire," I said. "I wanted to talk to you before." Before I could even finish, Mom's expression completely changed. Her eyes hardened, and her lips pressed into the same thin line I remembered from my childhood. "What did you do to upset him?" I just stared at her for a second. "I didn't do anything. I'm trying to explain." Dad let out a tired sigh and placed his tablet on the table. "Here we go again," he muttered. "What is it this time?" I hadn't even finished one sentence. I hadn't explained a single thing, and somehow I was already on trial. Once again, I was automatically the problem. A cold feeling settled deep in my stomach. 20 years had gone by, yet nothing inside this house had really changed. Here, Mason was always the one who got hurt, and I was always the one blamed for it. That had been the rule for as long as I could remember. I opened my mouth to try again, but before I could speak, the front door opened. Mason walked in. His eyes were red and watery. His hands were shaking, and he was breathing in short, uneven gasps like he'd been crying the entire drive over. The performance was perfect. Mom rushed to him without thinking twice. "Mason, sweetheart, what happened? Are you okay?" She grabbed his shoulders and gently led him to the kitchen table. As she did, she shot me a look over her shoulder. The kind of look that said she had already decided this was somehow my fault. Dad stood nearby with worry written all over his face. "Son, are you all right?" he asked. "Sit down. Tell us what happened." I tried to interrupt. "Can I please finish what I was saying?" Mom spun toward me immediately. "Can't you see your brother is upset? For once in your life, stop making everything about yourself." Her words hit harder than a punch. I just stood there with my mouth hanging open while both of my parents surrounded Mason. Mom handed him a glass of water. Dad kept a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Both of them quietly comforted him while he soaked up every bit of attention. He looked so broken that anyone walking into the room would have thought someone had just died. Finally, Mason took a shaky breath and looked up at our parents with red, tear-filled eyes. "I didn't want to say anything," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I've been carrying this around for so long, and I just can't keep it inside anymore." Mom squeezed his hand. "You can tell us anything, son. Whatever it is," Dad added. "We're here for you." For just a split second, Mason looked at me. Behind those fake tears, I caught something else. A cold, satisfied smile hiding underneath. Then he turned back to our parents. Ethan admitted that he only married Claire because of her money. He laughed about it, said he'd finally escaped having to struggle, said he'd never have to worry about money ever again. He wiped his face and right on cue, his voice cracked again. I didn't want to believe him either. I'd never heard silence feel so loud. I watched the expressions on my parents' faces change as they stared at me. They looked at me like I was a complete stranger, like I had become exactly the kind of person they'd secretly believed I was all along. "That's a lie," I said. The words came out louder and sharper than I intended. "Every single word of it is a lie. I never said that. I never said anything even close to that." Mason slowly shook his head. "I didn't want to believe it either, Ethan," he said sadly. "But you did say it. You laughed about how easy it was to make her fall in love with you. You said you'd never have to work another day for the rest of your life. None of that ever happened," I shouted. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my financial records. Look at my accounts. This money was saved before I ever met Claire. I worked 3 different jobs while I was in college. I paid off every dollar of my student loans myself. This income comes from the company I built with my own hands. I held the phone out toward my mom. "Look at it. I built all of this myself. I don't need anyone else's money." She never even looked at the screen. Instead, she stared at me with that exhausted, disappointed expression parents give a child they think has been caught lying. Dad dismissed everything with a wave of his hand. "Anyone can fake numbers. You've always been good at making yourself look like the victim." Those words made me feel physically sick. I had evidence. I had records. I had proof. None of it mattered. None of it mattered because my parents had already made up their minds. They decided what they believed before I even walked through their front door. Just then, the front door opened again. Claire rushed inside. She must have broken every speed limit in town to get there that quickly. Her eyes swept across the room in seconds. Mason crying at the table. My parents gathered around him. Me standing by myself with my phone still in my hand. Her jaw tightened immediately. Without saying a word, she walked straight over to me and gently placed a hand on my back. "I came as fast as I could," she said softly. "What did I miss?" I looked at her. "Mason told my parents I married you for your money. He claims I admitted it to him. He says I laughed about it." Claire's expression instantly turned cold. She looked straight at my parents. "That's ridiculous. I've been married to Ethan for 3 years, she said firmly. "I've watched him worry over his own bills. I've seen him refuse every offer I made to help pay off his student loans. He insisted that we split every expense 50-50, even after I told him he didn't have to. Not one time has he ever asked me for money. Not once." My mom slowly shook her head, looking at Claire with an expression that almost seemed sympathetic. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "He's fooled you too. He's always been good at that." Claire stared at her in disbelief. I'm sorry. What? Dad stood up and walked directly toward my wife. He didn't even acknowledge that I was standing there. It was as if I had completely disappeared from the room. I'm going to give you one piece of advice, he told her. Leave him. Get out while you still have the chance. Do it before he takes everything you've worked so hard for. I stepped in front of him without thinking, putting myself between my father and my wife. Stop. You don't get to stand here and lecture my wife about my marriage while I'm right in front of you. This is my life. She knows me better than either of you ever has. Dad never even turned toward me. He kept staring at Claire like I hadn't said a single word, like I was nothing more than another piece of furniture in the room. He fooled us too, Dad said quietly. He convinced us he'd changed. We actually believed he'd grown out of all that drama from when he was younger. But people don't really change. Something inside me shifted. A part of me that had been holding on for years finally gave up. Drama, I repeated. Is that really what you call it? Mom's face tightened. Ethan, don't start. No, I said. I honestly want to understand. What drama are you talking about, Mom? What exactly did I do that was so unforgivable? She slowly stood from her chair. When she spoke again, her voice was calm. For some reason, that hurt even more than if she'd yelled. You know what I remember? I remember you standing in this very kitchen when you were 16. You looked at your father and me and said we were bad parents. You told us we didn't know how to raise children. She let those words hang in the air between us. The silence felt heavy. We forgave you for saying that, she continued. We welcomed you back into this family. We watched you build your little life. And we were proud of you. Now I find out you've been lying to that woman since the day you met her. She slowly shook her head. You've always turned everything into a disaster. You could never just be part of this family without tearing it apart. You always had to drag everyone into your drama and act like you were the only person who was hurting. Then she looked at Claire. And now he's doing the exact same thing to you. I didn't interrupt. I just stood there listening. Every word she said settled over me until, all at once, something finally made sense. I should have understood it years ago. My parents hadn't been manipulated by Mason. They weren't confused. They weren't innocent victims who believed the wrong story. Deep down, they'd been waiting for this moment. They'd been waiting for permission to stop pretending they'd forgiven me. They'd been waiting for any excuse to see me as the problem again. The difficult son. The one who noticed too much. The one who spoke out when nobody wanted him to. Mason hadn't changed their minds. He'd simply unlocked a door they'd been standing outside for the last 20 years. I reached over and took Claire's hand. We're leaving. Without another word, we headed toward the front door. As we passed Mason, I stopped. He looked up at me with tear-stained cheeks and that broken expression he'd been wearing ever since he walked in. Now I knew exactly what it was. An act. I kept my voice low, calm, almost emotionless. I don't know why you're doing this, Mason. But I promise you, I'm going to find out. For the first time all day, his expression changed. His eyes widened. His jaw tightened. A tiny bead of sweat appeared along his hairline. Just for a split second. The mask slipped. And underneath it, I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Real, unmistakable fear. I didn't know what he was hiding. Not yet. But I knew he was hiding something. And I was going to uncover it. Claire and I walked out of my parents' house together. Behind us, I heard my mom calling after me. She kept saying I was overreacting. She said I was only proving everything she'd been saying. I never turned around. The relationship I'd spent years trying to rebuild was gone. Reduced to ashes. But I wasn't defeated. I wasn't broken. Mason was protecting something. Whatever it was frightened him enough that he was willing to destroy my marriage, my reputation, and my relationship with my parents just to keep it hidden. And I wasn't going to stop digging until I uncovered the truth. For the first 5 minutes of the drive, neither of us spoke. My hands still wouldn't stop shaking. Claire gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned completely white. Her jaw was clenched so hard I could actually see the muscles twitching. Finally, she broke the silence. They didn't even look at your bank statements. Her voice was calm, but every word carried anger. Your mother didn't even glance at your phone. And your father dismissed everything like you were showing him a grocery coupon. They never wanted the truth, Ethan. They just wanted an excuse to treat you like garbage again. And Mason handed them exactly what they were looking for. I rubbed my hands over my face and pressed my palms against my eyes. My mom's words kept echoing in my head. You're bad parents. You don't know how to raise kids. She'd carried that around for 20 years, waiting for the perfect opportunity to throw it back at me. And Mason, Claire continued, growing even angrier, crying on command, shaking like he was falling apart. That wasn't real. It was a performance. I've seen more believable acting in car commercials. He had every word planned. He practiced that story. He knew exactly what he was going to say and exactly how he wanted to say it. She hit the steering wheel with the palm of her hand. What kind of brother does something like that? I didn't have an answer. That was the part one couldn't understand. Mason and I had never been especially close, but he was still my brother. We shared a lifetime of memories. When he lost his job, I'd helped cover his rent. I stood beside him as the best man at his wedding. I'd shown up for every birthday, every holiday, every important family event. And somehow, he'd repaid all of that by trying to destroy my marriage and convince my own parents that I was a fraud. But why? I finally asked out loud. What does he actually get out of this? Even if my parents believe every word. Even if he ruins my relationship with them. What's the payoff? Claire stayed quiet for a few moments before speaking again. I've been thinking about that. There's something I've never mentioned because I thought maybe I was imagining it. I turned toward her. What is it? The way Mason acts around Chloe. Hannah's sister. She looked over to make sure I knew who she meant. Hannah was Mason's wife. I've noticed it for a long time. He acts completely different whenever Chloe's around. He always finds an excuse to sit beside her. He laughs way too hard at everything she says. And somehow he's always offering to help her with something. I frowned. Chloe? I barely know her. I see her at family gatherings every now and then, but we've hardly ever talked. Claire nodded. Exactly. You barely pay attention to her. But Mason notices every single time she walks into a room. I've seen it at cookouts, holiday dinners, Hannah's birthday party last year. The second Chloe arrives, it's like he becomes a different person. He gets louder. He becomes more energetic. He even stands a little straighter. She slowly shook her head. I kept telling myself I was reading too much into it. But after everything that happened today, I don't think I imagined any of it. I leaned back and let that sink in. Mason and Chloe. It didn't add up. He was married. He'd been married to Hannah for years. They own a house together, I said. They've built an entire life together. You really think he's capable of cheating? Claire let out a short, bitter laugh. After everything I watched him do to you today, I think he's capable of just about anything. She reached across the center console and grabbed my hand. Her grip was steady and reassuring. We're going to figure out what he's hiding. Whatever game he's playing, we'll learn every rule. I squeezed her hand back. Okay. Then let's start with Hannah. About 20 minutes later, we pulled into Mason and Hannah's driveway. The downstairs lights were still on. Hannah's car was parked outside, but Mason's was gone. He was probably still at my parents' house, enjoying what he thought was his victory. How do you want to handle this? Claire asked as she shifted the car into park. Carefully, I replied. I don't want to blow up Hannah's life until we know exactly what's going on. She nodded. Understood. I'll follow your lead. But if she knows something important, I'm not going to let it slide. We walked up to the front door, and I knocked. A few seconds later, Hannah answered. She was wearing leggings and a cardigan, holding a mug of tea, and looked completely confused to see us standing there. Ethan? Claire? Her eyes moved from one of us to the other. What are you two doing here? I forced a casual smile. We were nearby and thought we'd stop in. Is Mason home? She shook her head. No. He left for your parents' house a couple of hours ago. He said he needed to talk to them about. She stopped in the middle of the sentence. Her eyes studied my face. What's going on? Claire stepped forward. Can we come inside? We need to talk. Hannah looked even more puzzled, but she stepped aside without arguing. We followed her into the living room. Claire and I sat down on the couch while Hannah settled into the chair across from us. She looked back and forth between us. You're scaring me. Is someone hurt? Is Mason okay? Mason's physically fine, I answered. But something happened today, and we're hoping you can help us understand it. Hannah wrapped both hands around her mug. Help you? How? Claire leaned forward. How are things between you and Mason? Honestly, Hannah let out a humorless laugh. That's a complicated question. She looked down into her tea. I guess we're okay. We're fine. Claire tilted her head. You don't sound convinced. Hannah stayed quiet for a few seconds before answering. He's been different for years. I don't even know how to explain it. Sometimes it feels less like I'm married to him and more like I'm living with a roommate. Even when he's sitting right beside me, it's like his mind is somewhere else. I spoke gently. What do you mean by different? She shrugged. Distant. Emotionally checked out. I'll try to plan a date night, and suddenly he's too tired. I suggest a weekend away, and he gets a headache. Or work suddenly becomes an emergency. I ask him if he's happy, and he always says yes. But I can see in his eyes that he doesn't mean it. She took another sip of tea before continuing. I keep wondering if I'm the problem. Maybe I'm not pretty enough. Maybe I'm boring. Maybe I'm just not enough. And I don't know how to fix a marriage when I don't even know what's broken. Hearing that made my chest tighten. Hannah had always been kind, loyal, the type of person who blamed herself for things that were never her fault. Claire spoke softly. When did all that start? The distance, I mean. Hannah thought about it for a moment. I'm honestly not sure. It's hard to point to one specific time. Maybe it was always there, and I just didn't notice. She stopped talking for a second and frowned. No, that's not true. When we first got together, he wasn't like this. He was warm. He was present. Then one day, it's like he pulled away. She fell silent. Her eyes drifted into the distance, as if she were replaying old memories, searching for something she'd missed. Then her expression suddenly changed. You know what's strange? She spoke slowly, almost thinking out loud. He's never like that with Chloe. Claire and I exchanged a quick look. Neither of us moved. What do you mean? Claire asked carefully. My sister. When Chloe's around. I don't know. He comes alive. That's the only way I can describe it. Hannah shook her head. He laughs more. He talks more. He remembers everything about her. Her work. Her hobbies. Her schedule. Last spring, he insisted we drive 2 hours to Chloe's housewarming party. That whole week he'd been complaining about deadlines at work. But somehow he had plenty of time for that. Then my best friend came into town, and suddenly he had a migraine and couldn't make dinner. She placed her mug on the table and rubbed both hands across her face. I've never really thought about it like this before. But whenever Chloe needs help, he's grabbing his keys before I even finish asking. When I need help, somehow there's always an excuse. Claire looked over at me. I gave her the smallest nod. Then she turned back to Hannah. Has Mason ever said anything about Chloe? I mean, anything that sounded like more than normal family affection? Hannah's expression instantly hardened. What exactly are you asking me? Claire answered carefully. We're asking because... No. Hannah shot to her feet so quickly that her mug rattled against the table. No. You don't get to walk into my house, ask questions about my marriage, and then suggest my husband has feelings for my own sister. That's insane. Mason has his flaws, but he's not. She stopped herself. He wouldn't do that. Now she was pacing across the room with her arms wrapped tightly around herself. You're wrong. Whatever you're thinking, you're wrong. He loves me. He married me. We've built a life together. We've been married for 6 years. And now you're standing here trying to tell me he's secretly been in love with my sister all this time? That's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. Hannah, Claire began. And even if, Hannah interrupted. Even if he somehow had feelings for her. Which he absolutely doesn't. What does that have to do with any of this? She looked directly at us. Why are you here? Why are you asking these questions? Her voice cracked. What happened today that made you drive all the way over here and turn my life upside down? I slowly stood. Hannah, please sit down. We need to explain everything. Then explain it, she snapped. She was yelling now. Stop dancing around it and just tell me. I took a slow breath. Mason came to my wife today. I kept my voice as steady as I could. He told her I only married her because of her money. He claimed I'd admitted it to him. He said I laughed about finally making it. Hannah froze. What? It's all a lie. Every word. I never said anything like that. I've never even thought it. But Mason told Claire that story. Then he went straight to my parents and told them the exact same thing. My voice almost cracked. I forced myself to keep going. My parents believed him. They told Claire she should leave me. They said I'd been fooling everyone for years. Your husband walked into my parents' house, crying, shaking, and put on a performance that destroyed my relationship with my family in less than 20 minutes. The color drained from Hannah's face. No, that's not. Mason wouldn't. We saw him do it, Claire said firmly. He cried on command. He shook like he was the victim. It was rehearsed. He knew every word before he ever walked through that door. Hannah slowly lowered herself back into her chair. It looked like her legs had simply given out beneath her. She stared at the floor for a long time. Finally, barely above a whisper, she spoke. Why? Why would he do something like that? That's exactly what we're trying to figure out, I said. That's why we're here. That's why we asked about Chloe. Because none of this makes sense. Not unless there's something else happening. Something none of us can see yet. The room stayed quiet for what felt like forever. When Hannah finally looked up, tears had filled her eyes. I'm coming with you. I'm coming with you, Hannah said all at once. Wherever you're going next, I'm going too. Claire gently shook her head. I don't think that's the right move. Not yet. If Mason comes home and you're gone, he'll immediately know something's wrong. We need you to act like everything is normal until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Hannah's expression hardened. So I'm supposed to sit here and pretend none of this happened? Pretend my husband didn't just try to destroy his own brother's life? For now, I said quietly. Just for now. We'll tell you everything we learn. I promise. Hannah stared at the wall without saying a word. The silence dragged on so long that I started to think she wasn't going to answer. When she finally looked back at me, her eyes seemed empty, completely lost. I don't even know who I'm married to anymore, she whispered. I thought I knew him, but I don't. We left her house without saying much. I couldn't stop thinking about the look on her face. First she'd been confused, then angry, then something far worse. That empty expression when she admitted she no longer recognized the man she'd married. That stayed with me. That was hard to watch, Claire finally said. She had absolutely no idea. I think she knew something was wrong, I replied. She just couldn't put a name to it. Everything she described. The emotional distance. The canceled plans. The way he comes alive whenever Chloe is around. She's been seeing those signs for years. She just didn't want to accept what they meant. And today we basically dumped all the missing puzzle pieces in front of her. Claire glanced over at me. But we still don't have the biggest answer. The why. We know Mason has some kind of obsession with Chloe. Or at least that's what's happening in his head. We know his marriage is basically empty. But how does any of that explain why he came after you? That's why we need to talk to Chloe. She lived about 15 minutes away in a small apartment complex. While we were driving over, Claire called her. She simply said we needed to discuss something important. Chloe sounded confused, but she agreed to see us. A few minutes later, she buzzed us into the building. When she opened the apartment door, she looked completely puzzled. Ethan? Claire? She gave each of us a quick, awkward hug. This is unexpected. Is everything all right? Her apartment was neat and cozy. There was a comfortable reading chair beside the window. Plants filled nearly every windowsill. She offered us each a glass of water before sitting across from us. She genuinely looked like she had no idea why we were there. So, what's going on? You both sounded pretty serious. Claire didn't waste any time. We need to ask you about Mason. Chloe's eyebrows shot up. Mason? What about him? I decided to start somewhere simple. How did the two of you first meet? She looked surprised by the question. Years ago, before he and Hannah ever started dating, we worked at the same company for a few months. We'd eat lunch together sometimes, talk during breaks. He was easy to get along with. She shrugged. Later, I introduced him to Hannah at one of her birthday dinners. They really hit it off. The rest is history. Claire and I exchanged another look. So you knew him before your sister ever did. Claire spoke carefully. And you're the one who introduced them. Chloe smiled. Yeah. I honestly thought they'd make a great couple. Hannah had just gotten out of a terrible relationship. Mason seemed stable. He seemed like exactly the kind of guy she needed. She laughed softly. When they started dating, I was pretty proud of myself. They've been married 6 years now. I've always joked that I deserve all the credit. Then she noticed neither of us was smiling. Her own smile disappeared. What's going on? Claire looked directly at her. Chloe, do you think Mason has feelings for you? I watched Chloe's face change over and over again. First confusion, then discomfort, then recognition. The kind of recognition that comes when someone finally admits something they've been avoiding for a long time. There have been moments, she admitted quietly. Things I convinced myself didn't mean anything. He hugs me a little too long. He always finds a way to sit beside me at family dinners. And sometimes, the way he looks at me. She shook her head. But he's married to my sister. Why would he marry Hannah if he... She stopped talking, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The timeline. Chloe had known Mason first. They'd worked together, spent time together, had lunch together. Then she'd introduced him to Hannah. And he'd married Hannah anyway. Oh my God. I whispered. Do you think he married Hannah because it was the only way to stay close to you? Even as the words left my mouth, they felt unbelievable, because I'd only just realized it myself. Chloe's expression twisted into horror. First confusion, then understanding, then complete disgust. No, that's sick. Hannah is my sister. They've been married for 6 years. He's shared a home with her. He sleeps beside her. He eats dinner with her. He's lived as her husband. Her voice cracked. And all this time, what? He was waiting? Waiting for me to notice him? Waiting for me to make some kind of move? She jumped to her feet and began pacing across the room. I introduced them. I brought them together. I thought I was helping my sister find someone good. And he used that. He used Hannah to stay close to me. He manipulated both of us. This whole time, she turned back toward us. Her face was bright red. Does Hannah know? Does she know her husband only married her because he couldn't have me? We just came from her house, Claire answered gently. She knows something is wrong, but she doesn't know all of this yet. Chloe let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a groan. 6 years. 6 years of birthdays, Christmases, family dinners, and the whole time, he was sitting across the table thinking about me while my own sister held his hand. She looked physically sick. That's disgusting. I don't think I've ever heard anything more disgusting. There wasn't anything we could say to make her feel better. This was something she had to process herself. We quietly left her apartment. By then, almost every piece of the puzzle was in place. Once we got back into the car, Claire sat silently for nearly a minute. Then she spoke. So Mason has been obsessed with Chloe for years. He married Hannah just to stay close to her. Chloe never returned those feelings. So his entire marriage has been built on a lie. And he's miserable, I added. Hannah said he's been emotionally gone for years. He checked out of that marriage a long time ago. He's trapped in a life he never actually wanted. And he's been waiting for a woman who's never going to choose him. Claire slowly nodded. Then she looked at me. But you're different. I frowned. What do you mean? You're not trapped. You're not living a lie. You didn't marry me to get close to someone else. Her voice was thoughtful, like she was connecting the final pieces herself. You married me because you love me. And we're genuinely happy together. I slowly nodded as another realization settled in. He can't stand seeing that. I spoke almost to myself. He spent 6 years living a fake life. Watching Chloe never love him back. Stuck in a marriage that reminds him every day of what he can't have. Then he looks at us. And sees everything he'll never have. Claire quietly finished the thought. A real marriage. Real love. The happiness he wanted. The happiness he'll never get because the woman he actually loves doesn't even see him that way. Neither of us spoke for several moments. I could finally see the full picture. The motive. It was right there. I think I understand now, I said quietly. But I need to hear it from him. Claire turned toward me. What are you thinking? I took out my phone. I think it's time my brother and I had a conversation. Before doing anything else, I texted Hannah. Is Mason home yet? Her reply came back almost immediately. Yeah. Hannah texted back almost immediately. He's home now. Just got back. Why? I answered without hesitating. We know why he lied. We're on our way. As Claire started the car, she looked over at me. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? I nodded. I've never been more certain of anything. The drive back to Hannah's house felt much shorter than it had earlier. Maybe it was because this time I wasn't chasing questions. I knew exactly why I was going. I wasn't looking for clues anymore. I was going to make my brother tell the truth, whether he wanted to or not. Before we even reached the porch, the front door opened. Hannah was already standing there. Her jaw was tight, and the tension on her face told me she'd been waiting for us. He's in the living room, she said quietly. He has no idea you're coming. Good. I walked past her without another word. Mason was stretched out on the couch. His shoes were off. He was casually scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't spent the afternoon destroying my life. The moment he saw me, his expression changed. First came surprise. Then, almost unbelievably, a smug little smile. Ethan. Couldn't stay away? He tossed his phone onto the couch and leaned back. Let me guess. You came here to tell me I'm wrong. Maybe explain yourself. Or beg me to take everything back. He chuckled under his breath. It won't matter. Mom and Dad know the truth now. Everyone does. I looked him straight in the eye. You're right. They're about to know the truth. For the first time, I saw something flicker across his face. Claire stepped into the room and quietly stood near the doorway. Hannah followed and positioned herself where she could see all of us. Mason's smile slowly disappeared. He looked from one face to another. What is this? This? I said calmly. Is me telling you what I know. I never raised my voice. I didn't need to. You knew Chloe before you ever met Hannah. You worked together. You had lunch together. You spent time talking during breaks. And you fell in love with her. The amusement vanished completely from his face. What are you talking about? Chloe introduced you to her sister. And even though you wanted Chloe, you married Hannah anyway. I watched every tiny change in his expression. You married her because it was the only way to stay close to Chloe. That's insane, Mason snapped, but his voice had lost its confidence. That's completely insane. I married Hannah because I love her. You've been emotionally gone for years. Hannah's quiet voice cut through the room. You cancel every date night. You're never really present. But the second Chloe needs anything, you're out the door before I even finish asking. Mason spun around to face her. Hannah, you can't actually believe this. She didn't back down. I asked you once if you were happy. You said yes. But your eyes told me something completely different. I spent years believing I wasn't enough. I blamed myself. But now I realize. I was never the reason. I was never even the point. That's not true. Mason jumped to his feet. I love you. I married you. We've been together for 6 years. 6 years of making sure you always sat next to Chloe at family dinners. I said. 6 years of remembering her birthday, her hobbies, her schedule. 6 years of driving 2 hours for her housewarming party while pretending work was overwhelming. 6 years waiting for her to finally notice you. Mason's eyes darted wildly around the room. He looked at Hannah, then Claire, then me. He looked like someone desperately searching for an escape that didn't exist. This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. I was just being a good brother-in-law. Then say it. My voice stayed cold. Tell Hannah why you really married her. Tell her exactly what you've been waiting for all these years. I haven't been waiting for anything. His voice cracked and climbed higher. This is insane. You're all insane. I'm a good husband. I've spent 6 years being a good husband. Then why are you always the first to help Chloe? Why do you always find an excuse to sit beside her? Why do you remember every detail about her life? He immediately tried to explain it away. Because I'm friendly. Because I'm a good brother-in-law. Is that a crime now? You helped her move. I reminded him. You bought her thoughtful gifts. You drove hours just to attend her housewarming. So what? He was pacing now. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. So what if I'm nice to her? So what if I show up for family? That doesn't prove anything. You hug her too long, Hannah said quietly. You always find a way to sit beside her. You light up every time she walks into the room. I've seen it for years. I just refused to believe what I was seeing. Hannah, stop. Mason whirled toward her. His eyes looked almost frantic. They're turning you against me. They're lying. Ethan's always been jealous of me. He's always wanted to tear me down. I stepped closer until only a few feet separated us. Jealous of what? Your empty marriage? The wife you've emotionally abandoned? The woman you've spent 6 years obsessing over? Who doesn't even think of you that way? Shut up. Mason's face was bright red. Tears streamed down his cheeks. You don't know anything. You have no idea what this feels like. You don't understand. Then help me understand. I moved even closer. So explain it. Explain why you married Hannah. Explain why you've spent years obsessing over Chloe. And explain why you tried to destroy my life today. I wasn't trying to destroy your life. You told my wife I only married her for money. You lied to my parents. You stood in their kitchen, cried fake tears, and destroyed my family with a story you made up. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Mason backed away. His fingers dug into his own hair. This wasn't supposed to happen. I just wanted. What? Hannah's voice echoed through the room. What did you want, Mason? What have you wanted all these years while I've been exhausting myself trying to make you happy? He backed into the wall. There was nowhere left to go. His chest rose and fell in frantic breaths. His eyes bounced from one of us to the next like a trapped animal. You don't understand. None of you understand. I tried to love you, Hannah. I really did. I tried. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about. About who? Hannah demanded. He covered his face. I never wanted this. His entire body shook as he cried. His face was soaked with tears. I thought the feelings would go away. I thought that if I stayed close enough, if I waited long enough, maybe someday she'd finally notice me. Who, Mason? I shouted. I grabbed him by the shoulders. Say her name. Say it. I can't. Say it. The words burst out of him like they had been trapped inside for years. Because they had. Because I love her. I love Chloe. I've always loved Chloe. From the first day I met her. I knew she was the one. Then she introduced me to Hannah. And I convinced myself. If I stayed close enough. If I became part of her family. Eventually she'd realize we were meant to be together. The room fell completely silent. Mason was breathing so hard it looked like he couldn't catch his breath. His face was soaked with tears, bright red. He looked like a man watching his entire world fall apart. Because that's exactly what was happening. Hannah let out a quiet, painful sound, like someone had hit her in the chest. Mason immediately turned toward her and reached out. Hannah, I didn't mean. It's not what you think. She stared at him in disbelief. You just admitted you love my sister. Her voice was barely audible. We've been married for 6 years. And you just told me you love my sister. I love you too, Mason cried. I love both of you. It's complicated. Hannah slowly stepped backward. No, it's not complicated. You married me so you could stay close to her. That's exactly what they've been saying. And you just admitted it yourself. Mason was crying uncontrollably now. I thought if I stayed close enough, if I became part of the family, eventually she'd see me. I thought she'd realize we belonged together. I just needed more time. Hannah let out a broken laugh. More time? 6 years, Mason. You needed 6 years of my life. 6 years of our marriage. 6 years of me wondering what was wrong with me. She turned away from him. It was obvious she couldn't even bear to look at him anymore. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like I'd won. Instead, I just felt sick. But there was still one question I needed answered. Why me? Mason slowly looked over at me. His face was swollen and streaked with tears. This time there was no acting, no performance. Everything on his face was real. Why did you come after my marriage? What did I ever do to you? He let out a bitter, broken laugh. You didn't do anything, Ethan. That's the problem. You didn't have to. And somehow you still got everything. What are you talking about? You married for love. He practically spat out the word. As if it tasted poisonous. You found someone who actually chose you. Someone who genuinely wanted you. He pointed toward Claire. She looks at you like you're the only man in the world. She's never going to spend her life wishing she was with someone else. She's never going to wait around hoping somebody better notices her. She actually loves you. His voice cracked again. And I have to watch it. Every holiday. Every family dinner. I have to sit there watching the two of you be happy. While I'm trapped inside the prison I built for myself. I'm stuck waiting for a woman who doesn't even know I exist in that way. He wiped at his face with the back of his hand. Do you have any idea what that's like? To realize you've wasted years chasing someone you'll never have? And then look across the table. And see your own brother living the life you wanted? I looked at him quietly. So you decided to destroy it. You told Claire I married her for money. You lied to our parents. You wanted everyone to believe my marriage was fake. His shoulders shook. Because if your marriage was fake, Then I wouldn't be alone, he screamed. If you married for money. The same way I married for access. Then I wasn't the only pathetic one. I wasn't the only person who threw his life away. We'd be the same. Two brothers. Two terrible decisions. And maybe then. His voice disappeared. He couldn't finish the sentence. He simply stood there crying. His arms wrapped tightly around himself, like he was trying to keep himself from falling apart. At that moment, I finally understood everything. Mason never truly hated me. He wasn't trying to destroy me because of something I'd done. He simply couldn't bear being the only brother trapped in a fake marriage. If he could convince everyone mine was fake too, then he wouldn't have to face his own choices alone. My marriage isn't fake. I spoke calmly. I love Claire. And she loves me. We're happy. No lie you tell our parents. No lie you tell anyone is ever going to change that. Mason looked at me with exhausted, bloodshot eyes. There was nothing left for him to say. Hannah quietly walked to the front door. She opened it. Get out. Mason looked at her. Hannah, please. She didn't even blink. Get out of my house. I'll have your things sent wherever you end up. But you're leaving tonight. He looked around helplessly. Where am I supposed to go? Hannah's voice was empty, completely emotionless. I don't care. Go stay with your parents. Get a hotel. Go to Chloe, for all I care. But you're not staying here. Not after this. Mason turned and looked at me one last time. I couldn't tell what he was hoping to find. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe sympathy. Maybe one last sign that I was still his brother. I gave him none of it. He had made his choices. Now he had to live with them. Without another word, he picked up his keys and walked out. Hannah stood in the doorway, silently watching him leave. After he disappeared, she slowly closed the door. Then she rested her forehead against it. 6 years. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I gave him 6 years. I'm so sorry, Hannah. And I meant every word. She hadn't deserved any of this. She was kind, faithful. The only mistake she'd made was giving her heart to the wrong man. She turned around and looked at me and Claire. Thank you. I needed to know the truth. We quietly left her standing there, alone in the living room, surrounded by the empty space where her marriage had once existed. As we drove away, Claire reached over and took my hand. You okay? I thought about everything that had happened. My parents had chosen to believe lies over their own son. My brother had tried to destroy my marriage. In a single day, I'd uncovered 6 years of deception. But sitting beside me was a woman who had never questioned me for a second. She stood beside me through every accusation. She believed me when nobody else did. She loved me, real love, the kind Mason had spent years pretending he had. I looked over at her and smiled. Yeah, I'm okay. Claire squeezed my hand. He tried to turn what we have into something ugly, but he couldn't. I nodded. He failed. Mason wanted someone to share his misery. Instead, he ended up with nothing, completely alone.